I left school at 15, which was permissible in those days in England. And I got a job as a runner, which would now be called a production assistant at Pathé News, running up and down Waller Street with cans of film from the laboratory to the news cutting room. And I did that for about a year, and then eventually got upgraded. I used to go out and help the newsreel cameramen. They were sort of one-man bands, and anything big like the Queen's birthday, the Cup final, or anything where they needed a bit of help or had to wait for many hours, I would sit and watch the equipment and help them whilst they went off and had their coffee and tea and whatever. And then that generally progressed, and I eventually got a union ticket, and they wanted to put me in the cutting room, but I just really wanted to get into the camera department. So I left there, and luckily enough, there was a job at Danziger Studios, which is an independent studio just in Boreham Wood, run by the Danziger brothers that they were doing a small TV series at the time, and they'd churn out B features, one every 7 to 8 days. And I was a permanent member of the crew, except the cinematographers would be different on each show. And I got, one took me under his wing. And eventually, I think, I went to Israel on the A camera on a movie called Judith, which is a Peter Finch, Sophie Loren movie. And it was probably about 1961. And Nick Roeg was directing and photographing the second unit. And we and his crew became great friends. And after that, I stayed on with Nick and went on to a movie called The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. And then became part of Nick's regular crew. And after that, we went back to London and did Fahrenheit 451 with Truffaut. And then Casino Royale, one of the units on Casino Royale. And then I also pulled focus for Nick on Far From the Madding Crowd. He then went off to America to shoot a movie called Me and the Archduke Petulia, which Dick Lester directed, with Julie Christie and Richard Chamberlain, I believe. So I didn't know what I was doing, and in those days, you know, if you're part of a camera crew, you worked with your cinematographer, and if he didn't work, you didn't work. There was no line crossing between feature films and television. Television in those days in England had their own permanent crew, so I thought I'd be out of work. But the director of Far From the Madding Crowd, John Schlesinger, took me to Israel 2 days after the Six-Day War finished, and we made an official documentary for the Israeli government, which I shot. And on my return from that, I still didn't know where I was situated work-wise because Nick was still in America. So purely by John recommended me to Basil Dearden, and I shot my first feature in 1967. Which is a movie called Only When I Laugh with David Hemmings, which Basil Dearden directed. We shot that in New York, Beirut, London. It was a very, very big movie in those days. And then so that was the first thing I shot. And then the second thing I shot was a picture of Jean-Luc Godard in 1968. And just after that, Nick went to, he was shooting Walkabout. And he was the director cinematographer on that as part of his deal, but he wanted me to go out there. So I went out with Nick, and I sort of basically shot and directed the second unit, virtually everything that the actors weren't in, all the landscapes. And I got a credit as special photography on that. And after that, then was Don't Look Now, and the rest follows. Well, it wasn't difficult because really I'd always been in narrative, and it was just a strange coincidence that I got into rock and roll for that period. And how that happened was that when we finished the first picture I shot, Only When I Laugh, which is based on a Len Deighton story, it's the only comedy Len Deighton had ever written. After it was all cut and assembled, they decided they wanted to shoot a title sequence with the actors, but they'd hired a title producing company to do this sequence. And they thought that it would be good to have the cinematographer of the movie shoot this because it was live action. And the director of that was a young guy called Michael Lindsay Hogg, and he basically was mostly known for his rock and roll work with a British television show called Ready, Steady, Go. So I went into the studio to shoot this stuff with him. That's the first time I met him, and we became instant friends. And I guess a couple of weeks after that, he said, "Can you do a job for me on Saturday?" And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, we're going to do a thing with the Rolling Stones. We're going to do which would now be a pop clip for Jumping Jack Flash. And I guess at that time, some of those rock stars felt they were then too big to go on the show and play live, so they would finance, excuse me, they would finance their own pop clips and then hand it off to the show. So that's how that started. And then after that, we did the Rock and Roll Circus with the Stones. And then also I did the Godard picture with the Stones. And then Let It Be with the Beatles. And then some stuff with the Who for The Kids Are All Right. And it just transpired. So really I was into narrative film, and the rock and roll thing was just, for me, was just an amazing time. And, you know, one wished one had a digital camera in those days. Nick always kept things very close to the chest, and I don't know whether, I know he said at the end of Walkabout he really wanted me to shoot his next project. I mean, it wasn't, a lot of people always felt that it was Nick Roeg that gave me my break as a cinematographer. It really wasn't. As I said, it was John Schlesinger and Basil Dearden. So when Don't Look Now came up, and I think I said that Nick's relatively superstitious and kept, and rightly so, kept things close to his chest, and until they were sort of virtually definitely going. And I remember taking a meeting with Nick and him giving me the Daphne du Maurier short story, and then I read the script, and then we were off and running. And it was a very, very quick process in so much as that I guess it was early December, he and I went on a trip to Venice for about 3 days and scouted locations, and then came back and we started shooting Don't Look Now the week before Christmas. And we shot for 4 days in Hertfordshire, and we were blessed with incredible weather. I mean, you know what London can be like at that time of the year, but it was just it was really cold, and it was really one of those beautiful sunny winter days, or the days were beautiful. And we shot that whole Hertfordshire sequence in 4 days, and then we went to Venice straight after Christmas, straight after the New Year, and shot for 6 weeks. And it was an amazingly quick shoot for a movie as complicated as that. There was a lot of discussion, you know, obviously water, there's a great reference of water because of the drowning of the child and the canals of Venice, and red. I mean, red was the big thing. And we, obviously the little girl is in the red raincoat that drowns. The killer, the dwarf at the end, is in red. And you notice when you see the movie that all red is, most of the red is taken out. There's very little red in the cinematography itself. And there's no red in the costume or the wardrobe or the set dressing, except where it's very important. You notice when Donald, I think he comes out of the interview with the police station and sees a body being pulled up out of the water, and it's a wide shot. The boat is in the canal, and there's bridges all around, and a lot of people are watching, and there's a few school kids, and all the school kids have little red woolen hats on, and I think 1 or 2 of them have red lunch boxes. And it's always, whenever red appears, there's a sort of an element of danger in the movie, and it was beautifully designed. I mean, a lot of it was the set decoration and the choice of locations. Hertfordshire was just a beautiful country cottage, an extraordinary sort of amount of acreage and meadows outside, and then this pond where the child falls in. There weren't really any challenges inside in terms of photography. It was a really beautifully dressed cottage, large cottage. The only challenge was, for me as a cinematographer, was when Donald comes into the water to fish out or to go down underwater and pick out the body of his child. I was in there in a wetsuit. I mean, God knows how cold the water was. I mean, it was, as I say, it was the day before Christmas. It was Christmas Eve, I believe. And I was in there for about 6 hours. But it was sort of very exciting. I mean, it just was. But that was really the only challenge. I mean, but things were easier then. It was a little tiny, a little 2C camera, a little tiny camera, wrapped it up in plastic bag and got it as low to the water as possible. And I was in there with a grip, holding the battery above his head, and off we went. I mean, there were no challenges, and the challenges in Venice were much more the physical locations and not actually the shooting of the locations, but actually getting to and from the locations. I mean, it's inconceivable to think that we did all of that without, you can't just drive up to a door. I mean, it's a boat that stops somewhere, a barge that stops somewhere nearby. Those were the main challenges. And it was a very small crew. We couldn't basically rig a lot of buildings. A lot of these buildings were just beautiful old buildings. So a lot of it had to be done from the floor. And that big church we shot with natural light, as much as possible, and the candles. I think it was the first time that I managed to get a set of fast lenses, or one fast lens. We used a Panavision PVSR reflex camera, which had a shutter opening at 200, so I could squeeze 1/8 of a stop more out of that, and we forced the film, because the film was 50 ASA. Now we're shooting with 500 ASA, so we forced it to 100 ASA, which was a sort of breakthrough. But we used a lot of natural light. Well, I mean, influences that were important to the vision of the film. I mean, I was lucky enough, and Nick and I were friends, so we shared an apartment together. So we'd eat together every night. I mean, we were always together. So, I mean, it's really, the influence of the vision is Nick's. I mean, I always saw my job, and I still do see my job as a cinematographer, to put the director's vision on the screen. And hopefully enhance that vision and take it a step further. And it's really very, very easy when you're living with someone, because all we ever did was talk about the movie. I mean, whether it be over dinner, over breakfast, just before we went to bed having a cognac, it would always be talking about the movie and the next day. And when you talk, I mean, I'm experiencing with what Nick is saying what his vision of the movie is, and then it's my job to translate that. For me, it was wonderful working with someone who'd been a cinematographer. I mean, he kept very much out of the process and was never over my shoulder, over my back, and it just was a great help. I mean, we'd never get into, I presume we'd never get into any really difficult situations of shots that were impossible to do, because he knew they'd be impossible to do. And the things that make shots impossible is just one thing, and that's time. And time is money, and we didn't have any time. So it was a pretty smooth shoot. I mean, I think I'm repeating myself, but the process is understanding what the director wants, and you don't always get that. I mean, I've had it very rarely since then, because if people have families, they go home at the end of the day. When you're away on a location like that, and with a friend, or you're hanging, I mean, we were friends. I mean, I had an extraordinary relationship with Nick. I mean, when I first met him, he was very much like a father figure to me. And then later it became like it was a sort of a brother type relationship where we were equals, but he was the older brother. And now we're just really great friends. And it's been wonderful. I adore Nick. I love Nick, and I think he's a great visionary. Where Nick is a genius, I mean, obviously as a director, yes, but where he's a genius is in the cutting room. I mean, the love scene, the way that was cut, obviously that wasn't designed, I don't believe it wasn't designed to be the way it was in the finished product. It wasn't designed to be shot and intercut with them getting ready to go out. I mean, that was all done in totally Nick's idea in post, and it absolutely was brilliant. It was brilliant. And the love scene caused quite a ruckus, I mean, there were some strange things there that some people, we shot it very secretly. We rented a room in the Bar Hotel in Venice, and I do believe we had a sound mixer outside with in the hallway with a couple of mics around the bed, and we'd already done a partial sequence with them getting ready in the bathroom. And we snuck in one Saturday afternoon with Julian Donald and Nick and myself and a focus puller and just a camera and a couple of lights under our coats, and then we just got in there and shot it. And that, and I can't really, there was a lot of problems with how that would get out, in terms of it being secure. So our movie was being processed in Technicolor in Rome, but both Nick and I knew very well the guy running the front end at Technicolor in London, Des Ostinelli, and we sent that to him to develop and hold. So no one ever saw that. No one ever saw that negative until, I guess the first screenings, and it was really caught a lot of people's imagination. It's still today considered to be one of the best. I mean, nothing to do with me shooting it, but just the whole thing. One of the best love scenes ever shot. It's very, very real. It's really real. It's not like one of those sort of just love scenes where it's all romantic. This is really people really in love who haven't had sex for quite a long time because of the death of their daughter, and they're just really giving to each other and taking from each other, and it was just really wonderful. But it was truly made by Nick in the cutting room, and there was a lot of trust there. Both of them were completely naked, and Nick had promised them that they wouldn't see much, and you don't see much, but people, it's so real that people think that they actually probably made love, but they didn't. What's unique about Nick is the camera is terribly important. The visuals, they meld with the performance. It's not that you've got a performance and you're just recording that performance in the best way possible. I mean, it is very. The camera is like another person. The camera is another performer. It's on equal setting with the actors. I mean, every shot is very well planned and well worked out, and nothing is left to chance, really. Where we really scored was the incredible weather we had while we were in Venice. And on the interiors, in the lighting, I mean, I wanted it to be rather contrasty. I wanted to, the point is the shadows, just to put just a little tiny little light in the shadows that, is there something there? It's almost as if you want to smell it. I've always felt that you could smell Venice in that movie. I mean, it's a very foreboding place, Venice. Once you get into those non-touristy parts, it's very at night. It's very dark, very unsettling. And is there something there? Nothing is as it seems. And once again, of course, within the photography is the use of red, or lack of. The muted palette is done with lighting, and once again also with set decoration, our choice of locations. Everything was always muted. Nothing was, which led us in the direction that when the red comes into it, it really is popping. I mean, I guess that's all relatively easier to do today with digital intermediates and things like that, where you can isolate colors, you can put power windows. We didn't have any of that. I mean, it all had to be done in camera and on set. I mean, it was just a photochemical process, and that was it. When you color time the movie, you can make it lighter, darker, a little colder, get a bit of green out, put a bit of magenta in, and that's it. Nowadays, you have power windows, you can take all the red down, you can do this, you can do that, and it was better then. I think that it is Nick's vision that I put on the screen, and I helped to take it a stage further. I mean, it's a collaborative effort. Nick might be one of the more visual directors I've ever worked for, and I'm very lucky with that. And I've shot 5 movies for Nick, and they all have a very different visual style. And it's like when you know someone so well, it's you don't necessarily just a look, we'll throw a look at each other or something like that. You know, it's not a, it's, I know exactly what he wants and he knows what I'm capable of, you know, and it's, I don't know, it's a 50-50, you know, we talk, it's constantly because we talk about it all the time. And when you're with someone for that length of time and just nothing to talk about other than the movie, is I think the whole thing is you need to learn what the director wants. And sometimes, you know, it's not always possible to explain it, but it's something that, it's a feeling you get, you know. And I've known Nick for so long, and I know what his wishes are. He doesn't really storyboard stuff. Maybe an action sequence, but I can't recall anything being storyboarded in Don't Look Now. And you know, obviously he had rehearsed with the actors. I mean, not on the sets, but we would always rehearse each new scene and then block it. There were no shot lists. I just think it's a much more immediate way of working. And the great thing, I mean, would allow, and there's not any, you know, he knew what he wanted. It was, but then the actors put their input in, and they do their thing, and it generally just worked out. It just generally worked out, and that's the way Nick likes to work. I mean, he likes to draw from everybody and everything. I thought the finished film was absolutely brilliant. I still think that to this day, it's for a general audience, it's Nick's most accessible movie. I just thought it was brilliant, and the reception it got at the premiere was just outstanding. And I do believe it did very well in England as a movie, but I don't think it didn't get a very good distribution over here. And it was sort of never really, I guess it was sure. No, it's become a cult movie and much loved now. But I mean, it didn't do that well, and I think that was purely because of the distribution, and the advertising campaign. Because that year it wasn't up for any. That year it wasn't up for any of the any Oscar nominations. You know, whereas it got quite a few of the BAFTA nominations at the time, and because of the way the awards work. The BAFTA, the same people nominated for Oscars, certainly in my category, were not the same people nominated in the BAFTA awards in my category were also nominated in the Oscars. I won the BAFTA award, which was I'm grateful for. But so it didn't get. It didn't. I don't think it got very good distribution here, and I think there were many reasons. I think Paramount had it here. I don't quite know the ins and outs of all that. But it's a much-loved movie now. I mean, it really, I mean, I saw it the other night again for the first time for many, many years, and it really, really holds up. A lot of movies of that period just don't hold up, but it really holds up. It's, you know, it starts off with an incredible story, a Daphne du Maurier short story. It's one of it. I mean, I'm very pleased it's one of the best British films ever made. I mean, I'm part of that. I mean, there's some other great British movies, but I mean, this one really stands out, and I think I would say it's Nick's sort of masterpiece myself. I really would, and it was a great honor to do that movie. It'll probably be around a lot longer than me. There's an incredible shot in the movie that was a pure mistake on my behalf. Towards the end of right at the very end of the movie, where they're coming out of a canal across the Grand Canal for the funeral sequence in the funeral barges. We had 4 or 5 cameras around the Grand Canal coming, going to the church. And the last minute, Nick said, "Quick, we need to get a camera, get a camera in the barge." So a little handheld camera, and I lay down in the funeral barge where Julie's in the middle of the 2 sisters, and I was looking up at Julie in this close-up. And so I was in the shops. You couldn't. I was covered up with tarpaulins and as they came across. and get in there, and had a very fast lens on because it was very dark in the alley where they're coming out of the canal. So I exposed it for that, as one would normally do. I'd completely forgotten that when we came out of the alley, I was maybe 10 stops overexposed, and it was blown right out. But somehow the labs managed to print it down, and it became this incredible close-up of Julie, where her skin is like alabaster, and you see her eyes and her lips, and the black of the hat, and it was just, I think someone wrote about it as being one of the greatest close-ups of an actress since Greta Garbo in Queen Christina, and I have to say that there was a pure mistake on my behalf. But it was a great shot.